The massive holographic display dominated the center of the Galactic Council chambers, its blue light casting eerie shadows across the faces of dozens of alien species. Red markers blinked ominously across star maps, each one representing a fallen world, a destroyed civilization, or a lost battle. Ambassador Velnath of the Centauri Federation stood motionless before the display, his elongated fingers trembling as he watched another crimson dot appear where the Kepler 442 system had existed just hours before. 17 sectors lost in the past month alone, General Krikstar announced, his four muscular arms gesturing helplessly at the tactical display. His species had evolved from predatory hunters, yet even his warrior instincts felt useless against this enemy. Their war machines show no signs of slowing down. Every day brings news of another defeat. The chamber fell into a heavy silence broken only by the soft humming of life support systems and the occasional nervous clicking from the insectoid delegates. 3 long years of conventional warfare had brought nothing but death and retreat. The Vorthak Empire swept across the galaxy like a cosmic plague, their massive dreadnoughts carving through defensive fleets as easily as a blade cuts through paper. Velnath had seen the battle recordings. Vorthak vessels the size of small moons emerging from hyperspace, their energy weapons capable of cracking planets and reducing entire battle groups to glowing debris in mere minutes. Their shields seemed impenetrable, their armor unbreakable, and their tactics ruthlessly efficient. Every species in the galaxy had contributed their finest warships and bravest warriors, only to watch them vanish in brilliant flashes of destructive light. "We cannot continue like this," whispered Commander Thrixon, her crystalline body catching and reflecting the red glow of the tactical display. "At this rate, the core worlds will fall within 6 months." The other council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. They had tried everything their combined civilizations could offer. The Altarians had deployed their legendary battle cruisers with quantum torpedo arrays. The Rigel Collective had sent swarms of fighter craft piloted by their best aces. The Andromedan Defense Force had positioned their most powerful fortress stations at key strategic points. Nothing had worked. The Vorthak simply overwhelmed every defense with superior firepower and seemingly unlimited resources. "There is one option we have not considered," Velnath said carefully, his voice barely above a whisper. The chamber's attention focused on him like a laser beam. "The species from Sol 3. The reaction was immediate and explosive. The chamber erupted in a cacophony of dismissive clicks, growls, hisses, and electronic protests. Several delegates rose from their seats, their various appendages waving in agitation. "The primitives?" Admiral Tijwasin scoffed, her serpentine head weaving back and forth in disbelief. "They have barely achieved interstellar travel. Their technology is centuries behind our most basic systems. Their weapons are crude kinetic projectiles," added General Krikstar, his scarred face twisting in disgust. "Metal slugs fired from chemical propulsion systems. They might as well throw rocks at Vorthak armor." Velnath waited for the noise to die down before continuing. "They have something we do not," he said quietly. "They are untested. Unknown. Perhaps their crude methods could surprise the enemy in ways our advanced tactics cannot." "Are worthless against Vorthak shields and armor," Krikstar interrupted firmly. "I have studied their military capabilities. They fight with projectile weapons, explosive devices, and atmospheric aircraft. They would be slaughtered before they could fire a single shot." But even as the general spoke, another red marker appeared on the display. The Vega system had fallen. 12 billion lives extinguished in the time it took to have this conversation. The sight drained the fight out of most delegates, leaving them staring at their hands or tentacles in defeated silence. The truth was undeniable. Every conventional strategy had failed. Every advanced weapon system had proven inadequate. Every tactical doctrine developed over millennia of galactic warfare had crumbled against Vorthak's superiority. They were running out of options, running out of time, and running out of hope. Velnath looked around the chamber at faces representing hundreds of worlds and billions of lives. "What do we have to lose?" he asked simply. The vote was closer than expected, but desperation ultimately won over pride. The authorization was granted by a narrow margin, though many delegates clearly believed they were wasting precious time on a futile gesture. Meanwhile, Captain Kim Dae-ho of the United Earthship Horizon was conducting his regular patrol route near Saturn's rings, his crew running routine system checks on their modest vessel. The ship was nothing impressive by galactic standards, a simple fusion-powered craft with basic defensive systems and a crew of 30 humans who had never seen real combat. Kim sat in his command chair reviewing supply reports when his communications officer suddenly straightened at her console. "Captain, we are receiving a transmission on an unknown frequency. It appears to be of non-human origin. The message that followed, translated through primitive first contact protocols, was delivered in a mechanical voice that somehow managed to convey deep emotion despite its artificial nature. Kim had served in Earth's military long enough to recognize certain tones regardless of their source, and what he heard in that alien transmission was unmistakably the sound of desperation. "This is Ambassador Velnath of the Galactic Council," the voice said, each word carefully pronounced as if the speaker was struggling with an unfamiliar language. "We require military assistance. Our civilizations face extinction, and we have nowhere else to turn." Kim looked at his crew, seeing his own amazement reflected in their faces. First contact with alien life, and they were asking for help with a war. Admiral Park Minutho stood in the center of Kepler Station's main briefing room, surrounded by holographic displays that painted a picture of 3 years of galactic warfare. The floating images showed battle after battle, defeat after crushing defeat, as alien fleets threw themselves against Vorthak forces in what could only be described as organized suicide. But what amazed Park was not the overwhelming power of the enemy, but the complete tactical incompetence of his new allies. The Korean admiral had spent 40 years in Earth's military, rising through the ranks during humanity's expansion into space. He had studied every major conflict in human history, from ancient battles fought with swords and shields to modern space engagements with fusion weapons and energy shields. What he saw in these alien battle records violated every principle of warfare he had ever learned. "Let me understand this correctly," Park said slowly, his dark eyes moving from one alien delegate to another. "You announce your battle plans in advance to the enemy?" General Krikstar, the four-armed warrior from the Rigel system, nodded proudly. "Of course we do. Honor demands that we meet our enemies on predetermined battlefields. Both sides must have equal opportunity to deploy their forces and demonstrate their courage." Park felt his jaw clench. "And you always engage their main fleet directly? Head-on attacks against their strongest positions. What else would true warriors do?" Krikstar replied, his scarred face showing genuine confusion at the question. "To do otherwise would be cowardice. We face our enemies with strength and valor, meeting their best with our best in glorious combat." Lieutenant Colonel Lee So-young, Park's most trusted tactical advisor, stood near the holographic display controls. She was a small woman with sharp eyes that had analyzed countless battle scenarios during her 20-year career. The look she exchanged with her superior spoke volumes about their shared disbelief at what they were hearing. "Admiral," Lee said carefully, "may I show them something from our records?" Park nodded, gesturing toward the controls. "Please do." Lee activated her datapad and connected it to the station's projection system. The alien battle records vanished, replaced by scenes from Earth's military history. The assembled delegates leaned forward in their various seats as holographic recreations began playing out across the room. First came ancient battles from human history. They watched Chinese generals from thousands of years ago using terrain to channel enemy forces into killing zones. They saw Roman legions creating false retreats to draw barbarian tribes into carefully prepared ambushes. Medieval knights used weather and geography to gain advantages over superior numbers. The displays showed human commanders dividing enemy forces, attacking from multiple directions, and striking where their opponents least expected. The presentations moved through time, showing more recent conflicts. Naval battles where smaller, faster ships outmaneuvered larger vessels by avoiding direct confrontation. Air combat where pilots used clouds and sun glare to mask their approaches. Ground warfare where armies used deception, camouflage, and misdirection to defeat technologically superior enemies. "These are records from our conflicts throughout history," Lee explained as the images continued flowing. "Notice the patterns. Human military doctrine has always emphasized adaptability, deception, and striking enemy weaknesses rather than strengths." Commander Veltar, a crystalline being whose body reflected the light from the holographic displays, watched in growing horror. "This is..." He struggled to find the right words in the translated language. "This is complete dishonor. These tactics are beneath civilized beings." "This is survival," Park replied, his voice turning cold as Arctic ice. "Your concept of honor is exactly why you are losing this war. You fight by rules that your enemy does not follow, giving them every possible advantage." Several alien delegates began making agitated sounds, clicks and hisses that the translation systems rendered as protests about tradition and proper conduct in warfare. Admiral Thyssessian raised her serpentine head and spoke for many of them. "But our traditions have guided civilized species for thousands of years. Without honor codes, warfare becomes mere butchery. We cannot abandon everything that separates us from savage beasts." Your traditions will get you extinct, Park said, standing to his full height and letting his presence dominate the room. Every species represented here will be dead within a year if you continue following these outdated concepts. The Vorthax are not interested in your honor. They are interested in your destruction. The room fell silent except for the quiet humming of life support systems. Park walked to the tactical display showing current Vorthak positions and fleet movements. Give us complete intelligence on their fleet movements, supply lines, and command structure. Everything you have collected over 3 years of fighting. General Krikstar looked puzzled. Supply lines are not military targets. They carry food, fuel, and equipment. Attacking them would be dishonorable. Warriors fight warriors, not support personnel. Lee smiled, but there was no warmth in the expression. Her grin was sharp and predatory, like a wolf that had just spotted wounded prey. Supply lines are now military targets. Everything that keeps their war machine running becomes a target. You cannot be serious, Commander Thrixon protested, her crystalline form flashing with distressed colors. Attacking supply convoys and support facilities is not warfare. It is terrorism. Park moved to stand directly in front of the alien commander. It is victory. Your enemies eat food, burn fuel, and need ammunition just like everyone else. Cut off those supplies, and their mighty dreadnoughts become floating metal coffins. The Korean admiral accessed the station's main computer and began pulling up detailed analyses of the Vorthak fleet compositions. Look at your own intelligence reports. Their battle fleets are supported by hundreds of cargo ships, fuel tankers, and repair vessels. These support ships have minimal defensive systems because your honorable warfare has never threatened them. As the data displayed across multiple screens, even the alien delegates could see what Park was pointing out. Every major Vorthak fleet operated with long supply chains stretching back to their home systems. Fuel depots, ammunition storage facilities, and repair stations were positioned throughout occupied space with minimal protection. For 3 years, you have obligingly attacked exactly where your enemies expected, Park continued. Their strongest points, their most heavily defended positions, their prepared battlefields. Meanwhile, you have completely ignored their greatest vulnerability. The war room aboard the United Earth ship Defiance hummed with quiet energy as dozens of Korean officers gathered around the central holographic display. The room itself was designed for efficiency rather than comfort, with plain metal walls and harsh lighting that cast sharp shadows across the faces of humanity's finest military minds. Admiral Park Minute-Ho stood at the center of it all, his weathered hands gesturing toward floating images of alien starships while his officers absorbed every detail with the focused attention of professional soldiers. Major Kim Ji-won worked at her control station, her fingers dancing across holographic interfaces as she manipulated the three-dimensional display. Vorthak fleet compositions rotated slowly in the air, revealing details that had been hidden from galactic forces for 3 years of warfare. Each ship was labeled with its function, armament, and typical positioning within enemy formations. The data was overwhelming in its completeness, yet what it revealed was almost too simple to believe. The Vorthaks have never faced an enemy that refuses to announce itself, Park explained, his voice carrying the authority of 4 decades in military service. Every species they have conquered follows the same pattern of honorable warfare. They position their support vessels behind their battle lines because no opponent in 3 centuries has ever been dishonorable enough to target them. Colonel Choi Haijin looked up from her analysis station where she had been studying intercepted Vorthak communications. Her expertise in alien languages and communication protocols had proven invaluable in understanding how their enemies coordinated their massive fleets. Admiral, their command structure is incredibly rigid. Every order must be confirmed through multiple levels of hierarchy before implementation. Captain Yoon Tai-Minute frowned as he studied the tactical display, his experienced eye picking out details that troubled him. Sir, their command ships always stay in the rear positions? Even during active combat? Always, Park confirmed with a slight nod. For 300 years, their enemies have obligingly attacked their strongest defensive positions while completely ignoring their most vulnerable assets. Their command vessels, supply ships, and communication relays are positioned where galactic military doctrine says they should be safe from honorable attack. The gathered officers absorbed this information with the calculating minds of professional soldiers who had spent their careers studying warfare in all its forms. These were men and women who had risen through Earth's military during humanity's expansion into space, veterans of conflicts where victory often depended on thinking differently than the enemy expected. They understood immediately what their alien allies had failed to grasp after years of defeat. Lieutenant Commander Nam Soo-bin was the first to speak, her voice carrying a note of disbelief. Sir, according to this data, their logistics vessels operate completely undefended. No escort ships, no defensive systems, no security protocols whatsoever. Because they have never needed to defend them, Park replied, pulling up additional displays that showed Vorthak supply routes stretching across dozens of star systems. The Galactic Council provided us with real-time tracking of their entire supply network. They collected this information for 3 years but considered it irrelevant to military operations. The implications were staggering. Fuel convoys that kept the massive dreadnoughts operational, ammunition transports that supplied their devastating weapons, food shipments that fed their crews, repair facilities that maintained their war machines. All of it moving through space with no more protection than civilian cargo haulers, because galactic military tradition declared such targets beneath the notice of honorable warriors. Colonel Choi leaned forward, her analytical mind already working through possibilities. What about psychological warfare? Have they encountered organized disinformation campaigns or morale attacks? Park's expression grew grim. They do not even have a concept for such things. We had their linguists help us translate their military terminology. Their word for strategy roughly translates to honorable meeting of forces. They literally cannot imagine warfare as anything other than formal duels between opposing armies. The room fell into thoughtful silence as the Korean officers processed this information. They were looking at an enemy that had dominated the galaxy through superior technology and overwhelming numbers, but had never faced opponents who understood that war was about more than just firepower. The Vorthaks had become so accustomed to predictable enemies that they had never developed defenses against unpredictable ones. Major Kim Ji-won broke the silence with words that captured what everyone was thinking. Admiral, they are not really warriors at all. They are ritualists performing ceremonial combat. Exactly right, Park agreed, his voice carrying a note of cold satisfaction. They have turned warfare into a religious ceremony with strict rules and procedures. And like all ceremonies, it only works when everyone follows the same script. Captain Yoon studied the fleet deployment patterns one more time, noting how Vorthak formations spread their most important assets across the widest possible area to demonstrate their strength and confidence. Sir, their entire doctrine is based on intimidation through overwhelming display of power. They want their enemies to see how hopeless resistance appears to be. Which works perfectly when facing opponents who fight by the same rules, Colonel Choi added. But becomes a massive vulnerability when facing an enemy willing to ignore those rules entirely. Park moved to the communications console and activated the ship-wide intercom system. His voice would now reach every human vessel in the small fleet that had been assembled for this desperate mission. All units, this is Admiral Park. Prepare for Operation Silent Thunder. We are about to demonstrate something that has never been seen in galactic warfare. He paused, looking around at the faces of his officers one more time. These were people who understood that sometimes survival required abandoning comfortable traditions in favor of harsh realities. We have exactly 5 hours to end a war that has lasted 3 years. The enemy expects us to announce ourselves, to meet them in honorable combat, to follow their rules of engagement. Instead, we are going to fight the war they never prepared for. The transformation in the room was immediate and electric. These were no longer just military officers studying intelligence reports. They had become predators preparing to hunt prey that had never learned to watch for threats from unexpected directions. Vorthak Admiral Cruxmore stood on the bridge of his flagship, the massive dreadnought Eternal Dominion gazing through the reinforced viewport at the Zirian system spread before him. His armada of 10,000 vessels stretched across space like a glittering constellation of death, each ship representing centuries of military engineering and the finest warriors the Vorthak Empire could produce. This was the largest fleet ever assembled in galactic history, a force capable of reducing entire star systems to cosmic dust. The Admiral's scaled hide bore the ritual scars of 100 victories, each mark telling the story of another conquered species, another world brought under Vorthak rule. His yellow eyes gleamed with anticipation as he watched his fleet formations take their positions according to ancient military doctrine. Surely these new enemies, these primitive humans, would finally provide the glorious combat that had been missing from recent campaigns. Transmit the formal challenge, Cruxmore commanded, his voice carrying the authority of absolute power. Let them array themselves for honorable battle according to the traditions of civilized warfare. His communications officer, a younger Vorthak whose scales still held the bright colors of inexperience, worked at his console with practiced efficiency. The challenge went out across all frequencies, announcing the Empire's presence and demanding that the defenders arrange themselves in proper formation for the coming engagement. It was a ritual as old as spaceflight itself, observed by every species the Vorthax had encountered in 3 centuries of expansion. The response that came back left Cruxmore staring at his tactical displays in complete bewilderment. Instead of the expected mass formation of defensive vessels, he saw only 200 small human ships scattered seemingly at random throughout the star system. They showed no organization, no battle formation, no apparent strategy whatsoever. Many were positioned behind asteroids or near gas giant rings, locations that made no tactical sense according to established military doctrine. Is this some kind of jest? Cruxmore muttered, his scarred face twisting in confusion. Do these primitives not understand the protocols of warfare? Where is their main battle fleet? His tactical officer studied the displays with growing puzzlement. Admiral, these appear to be their only vessels in the system. Intelligence reports suggested they possessed a much larger navy. Meanwhile, Captain Han Sung-woo sat in the command chair of his stealth frigate Shadow Dancer one of the seemingly insignificant human vessels that the Vorthak admiral had dismissed. His ship was running in complete silence, all non-essential systems shut down, hull temperature matching the cosmic background radiation. To enemy senses, they were invisible, just another piece of space debris drifting through the system. Han checked his tactical display one final time, confirming what human intelligence had predicted with stunning accuracy. Every Vorthak supply ship, command vessel, communication relay, and support craft sat exactly where 3 centuries of honorable warfare had taught them to position such assets. They were safely behind the main battle line, completely undefended, because no civilized enemy had ever been dishonorable enough to target them. The Korean captain had spent 20 years in Earth's navy, fighting in conflicts where survival depended on adaptability and cunning rather than raw firepower. He understood something that galactic military doctrine had forgotten. Wars were not won by the strongest, but by the smartest. And right now, the enemy had just shown him exactly how to be smart. All units, Han transmitted on heavily encrypted channels that the Vorthax could not intercept, execute Operation Silent Thunder. Remember, we strike fast, we strike hard, and we disappear before they know what hit them. The Vorthax never saw the attack coming. Human ships that had been drifting silently through asteroid fields suddenly came alive, their engines igniting as they accelerated toward their predetermined targets. Other vessels emerged from behind planetary rings where they had been hiding in sensor shadows. Still more appeared from positions near the system star, where solar radiation had masked their heat signatures. The first wave struck 17 different supply depots simultaneously, their missiles and kinetic projectiles tearing through unarmored hulls that had never been designed to withstand military attack. Fuel tankers exploded in brilliant fireballs, ammunition ships detonated in chain reactions that lit up space like miniature stars, and repair facilities crumpled under focused bombardment. Before the Vorthak commanders could even understand what was happening, the second wave of attacks began targeting their command vessels. These ships, positioned far from the main battle line for their protection, found themselves under assault by enemies that materialized from impossible directions. Human vessels struck with precise, surgical attacks designed to cripple communication systems and eliminate command authority. Within the first hour, Admiral Cruxmore watched his perfectly organized fleet begin dissolving into complete chaos. His subordinate admirals screamed contradictory orders through damaged communication networks while their supply lines evaporated around them. Ships that had been fully fueled and armed minutes before now drifted powerless through space, their crews trapped aboard vessels that were rapidly becoming metal coffins. Where are they? Cruxmore roared, his yellow eyes blazing with fury and confusion. These cowards refuse to face us in honorable combat. Order all vessels to converge on our position and engage the enemy fleet. But there was no enemy fleet to engage. The humans fought like ghosts, appearing from shadows to strike critical targets before vanishing when Vorthak warships moved to intercept them. They used every piece of cosmic debris, every gravitational anomaly, every sensor blind spot to mask their movements. When pursued, they scattered like startled fish, only to regroup and attack from completely different directions. By the third hour of combat, half of the mighty Vorthak armada drifted helpless through space. Their fuel ships had been systematically destroyed, leaving massive dreadnoughts stranded without power. Their ammunition convoys lay in ruins, rendering their fearsome weapons useless. Their communication networks had been shredded by precisely targeted strikes that left isolated ship commanders unable to coordinate with their fleet. Lieutenant Commander Park Eun-ji guided her stealth frigate through the wreckage of what had once been a Vorthak command cluster, her sensors detecting the electromagnetic signatures of another priority target. Her ship was small and fast, designed for exactly this kind of surgical strike warfare. As her weapons locked onto an enemy communication relay, she smiled with grim satisfaction. Target their pride, she murmured to herself as her missiles found their mark, and they will show you exactly where their weaknesses are. The mighty flagship Eternal Dominion drifted through space like a wounded giant, its once proud hull now scarred and blackened by precise human weapon strikes. Admiral Cruxmore stood alone on his command bridge, surrounded by the flickering lights of damaged control systems and the acrid smell of burned electronics. Through the cracked viewport, he could see the floating wreckage of his armada scattered across the Zirian system like the bones of some ancient beast. 10,000 vessels had entered this system just hours before, representing the finest military force the Vorthak Empire had ever assembled. Now most of them were nothing more than twisted metal drifting silently through the void. Some had been destroyed outright by human attacks, their hulls split open and their crews lost to the vacuum of space. Others had been crippled and abandoned by their own crews when life support systems failed and rescue became impossible. The Admiral's yellow eyes, once bright with the confidence of inevitable victory, now stared dully at displays showing the full scope of his defeat. His escort vessels had either been destroyed in the opening hours of combat or had fled when it became clear that this battle was lost beyond any hope of recovery. The communication networks that had once coordinated his vast fleet now carried only static and the occasional desperate distress call from isolated survivors. "Admiral," his communications officer reported, his voice trembling with fear and disbelief, "we are receiving an incoming transmission from the human forces." Cruxmore turned toward the main view screen as it flickered to life, displaying the image of a human military officer. Admiral Park Minute-Ho appeared calm and professional, his dark uniform neat and his expression showing neither triumph nor cruelty. The Korean admiral's weathered face carried the quiet authority of someone who had seen many battles and understood the weight of both victory and defeat. "Admiral Cruxmore," Park said in carefully pronounced Vorthak, his words translated by sophisticated language processors, "your fleet has been defeated. I am offering you the opportunity to surrender. Your crews will be treated according to the Geneva Convention and the laws of warfare as recognized by the United Earth Government." Cruxmore had never heard the term Geneva Convention, but something in the human's tone and manner suggested concepts that were completely foreign to Vorthak military culture. The idea that defeated enemies might be treated with anything other than contempt or execution was so alien that the admiral struggled to understand what was being offered. "You would spare the defeated?" Cruxmore asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Even after we came to destroy your worlds and enslave your people?" Park's expression remained unchanged, showing neither anger nor hatred toward the enemy commander who had brought death and destruction to the galaxy for 3 long years. "We are not monsters, Admiral. We are soldiers, and soldiers understand the difference between necessary violence and unnecessary cruelty." The concept of mercy toward defeated enemies was as foreign to the Vorthak Empire as human military tactics had proven to be. For centuries, their culture had celebrated strength and conquest while viewing compassion as weakness. Yet here was this human offering protection to the very beings who had come to destroy his species. 5 hours and 17 minutes after the first human weapons had fired, the Vorthak Empire's greatest military force officially ceased to exist as a fighting organization. The news of this impossible victory spread across the galaxy at the speed of light, carried by quantum communication relays and hyperspace transmission networks that connected thousands of worlds. In the Galactic Council chambers on Kepler Station, Ambassador Velnath stared at the tactical displays with an expression of complete amazement. The holographic star maps that had been dominated by crimson markers of Vorthak advance for 3 terrible years now showed blue indicators representing human forces securing the entire Zirian sector. The transformation was so complete and so rapid that many delegates struggled to accept what they were seeing. "How?" whispered General Krixtar, his 4 arms hanging limply at his sides as he studied the impossible results. "How did they accomplish in mere hours what our combined fleets could not achieve in years of warfare?" Captain Kim Dae-ho, who had been the first human to receive the Council's desperate plea for assistance, now stood before the assembled representatives of dozens of species. His simple uniform looked plain compared to the elaborate ceremonial dress worn by many alien delegates, but his words carried the authority of someone who had just witnessed history being made. "You lost this war because you fought it exactly the way your enemy wanted you to fight," Kim explained, his voice calm but firm. "You followed their rules, met them on their chosen battlefields, and played by strategies they had spent centuries learning to counter. We won because we chose to fight the war on our terms, not theirs." Commander Veltar, his crystalline body reflecting the lights of the chamber, made sounds of protest that the translation systems rendered as moral outrage. "Your methods violate every principle of honorable combat that has guided civilized warfare for thousands of years. You attacked supply convoys, targeted support personnel, and used deception instead of honest battle. Kim's response was quiet but carried the weight of absolute conviction. Honor is a luxury that can only be afforded by those who are not facing complete extinction. We fought to protect innocent beings who could not protect themselves from an enemy that showed them no mercy. That is the only kind of honor that truly matters when survival is at stake. The vote that followed was not really a vote at all, but rather a unanimous acknowledgement of a new reality. Humanity was not simply welcomed into the Galactic Council as junior members or provisional allies. Instead, the representatives of dozens of worlds begged Earth's military leaders to completely reform their approach to warfare and defense. The age of ritualized combat, with its formal challenges and predetermined battlefields, ended that day in the council chambers. In its place rose a new era guided by the harsh but effective principles of human strategic thinking, where survival mattered more than ceremony and victory was more important than following ancient traditions. Later, as diplomatic ceremonies concluded and formal treaties were signed, Admiral Park Minute-Ho stood on the observation deck of Kepler Station watching human patrol ships moving through space alongside vessels from their new galactic allies. The sight filled him with both pride and concern as he contemplated the enormous responsibility that had just been placed on humanity's shoulders. Major Kim Ji-won approached and stood beside her commanding officer at the transparent aluminum viewport. "Sir, the council representatives are asking us to establish military training academies on every major world in their territories. They want to learn everything we can teach them about modern warfare." Park nodded slowly, his experienced mind already working through the implications of such a massive undertaking. "Then we will teach them what we know about fighting and winning wars. But we will also learn from them about the technologies and knowledge they have developed over thousands of years of galactic civilization. Together, we might be able to build something that neither humans nor aliens could achieve working alone." The war that had threatened to destroy galactic civilization was finally over. But Park understood that the real work of building lasting peace was only just beginning.